Morning, Acadiana. Thank you for tuning in to Local News Live, a production of AOC Community Media in partnership with the Acadiana Advocate, our source of local journalism here in Lafayette, Louisiana. And they are also covering the state of Louisiana. So this morning and every Monday through Friday between the hours of 9 and 10, we bring you local and state news stories and national stories that might be of interest to you. We could not do this production without the generous volunteer efforts of our newsreaders, who are often talented newsreaders, but sometimes multi-talented, like our newsreader this morning, Alicia Silva. Alicia, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great. How are you, Matt?
I'm doing great as well. It's a good morning to be alive and breathing. It's even cool a little bit.
Yes,
Eh,
yes,
And talking to you before the show, I found out that you were also a singer. So that is interesting to know and cool.
yes.
Well, thank you so much for lending your voice to this newscast. I'm going to go listen on Cypress Street, and I'll be here when you wrap up at the end.
Awesome. Good morning, Acadiana listeners. Today's news: Acadiana numbers hit high new highs. Excuse me. 16 deaths, 663 cases reported on Wednesday by Ben Myers. The coronavirus pandemic hit new levels of lethality in Acadiana on Wednesday, with records set for deaths reported in a single day and in a 2-week period. The 16 deaths reported in the 7 parish region on Wednesday were by far the most for a single day since the crisis began, double the previous record of 8 reached on May 14th. There were 60 deaths reported over 2 weeks as of Wednesday, surpassing the previous high of 56 on April 30th. Most of the deaths Wednesday came from Lafayette and Acadia parishes, which have both seen extraordinarily high per capita caseloads during the summer spike. Both reported 6 deaths Wednesday. Another hard hit parish, Iberia, recorded 2 deaths, and St. Landry and St. Martin parishes had one apiece. All 7 Acadiana parishes comprising Region 4 are in the top third of the state's 64 parishes for new cases per capita over the last month. Acadia Parish's 2,100 cases per 100,000 residents since June 23rd leads the state. By that same metric, Lafayette Parish is second among 14 parishes with populations of greater than 100,000. Calcasieu in neighboring Region 5 is first among large parishes. Wednesday also brought a massive new daily caseload coupled with high positive test rates, wiping out hints of progress in the region over the past few days. Yet, the regional outlook remained slightly better than it did 1 week ago based on weekly caseloads and positive test rates. The 663 cases reported Wednesday in the 7 parish Region 4 was the highest ever, surpassing even the July 20th total that state health officials said was inflated by old test results. The 7 day case count of 2,927, including the July 20th total, remained slightly below the high mark set on July 15th. The Wednesday case count represented 14.8% of newly reported tests for the day, pushing the weekly positive test rate above 10% in all 7 parishes. Still, the 7 day caseload as a percentage of new tests over was lower on Wednesday than 1 week ago in every parish except St. Martin, where there was no change. Hospitalizations for COVID-19 continued rising in Region 4 with a relatively large net daily increase of 17 on Wednesday. But the rate of increase in new hospitalizations may be slowing. With 304 inpatients reported across the region, there had been a net increase of 41 since July 15th. The previous 7 day period saw an increase of 66 inpatients, and there were 71 the week before that. Moving on to council backs removal of Alfred Mouton statue. Resolution receives unanimous support by Claire Taylor. 9 hours into a marathon series of meetings that began Tuesday and ended in the early morning Wednesday, the Lafayette City Council voted unanimously to support the parish mayor president's effort to remove the statue of Confederate General Alfred Mouton from city property downtown. At 2 a.m. Wednesday, the council adopted a resolution of support requested by Mayor President Josh Guillory before he heads to court in August. The vote was met with a standing ovation from about a dozen residents who had been in attendance since 5 p.m. Tuesday, some of whom have been fighting more than 4 years to have the statue removed. Guillory on July 2nd said he asked city parish attorneys to research how the city might move the statue to a place not on city property where it could be displayed in the proper historical context. Mouton, whose family donated land for creation of Lafayette, was a slave owner and Confederate general who died of wounds from a Civil War battle. In 1922, during the Jim Crow era of Black oppression, the United Daughters of the Confederacy paid to create the statue and donated it to the city, which erected it at the intersection of Jefferson Street and Lee Avenue, where the City Hall was built. In 1980, when city officials planned to move the statue to the new city hall, the United Daughters filed for an injunction to stop them. They reached an agreement with the city, and a judge granted the daughters a permanent injunction prohibiting the statue's relocation. After city parish officials in 2016 declined to tackle the removal because the United Daughters of the Confederacy threatened to sue, residents formed a group, Move the Mindset, which set about educating the community about Mouton's life and the statue's history as part of the Jim Crow era that tutored white supremacy decades after the Confederacy was lost. Move the Mindset's president, Fred Prejean, and several members sued in 2019 to intervene in the 1980 United Daughters lawsuit in an attempt to free the city to remove the statue. A hearing on the lawsuit is set for August 17th. We have an opportunity as a community to heal, to right a wrong, Guillory said before the vote. If you want to preserve history, do so, but without harming an entire class of people. Guillory said he believes the judge is in a position to rule on the matter August 17th. City officials are working to find a permanent home for the statue, he said. It would be removed and stored in a safe place until then. Councilman Andy Naquin said he grew up with Moutons and considered the statue iconic, but admittedly did not know its history nor Alfred Mouton's history until recently. He thanked Prejean and moved the he thanked Prejean and moved the mindset for pushing the matter in a respectful manner. As Rick Swanson, a professor at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, spoke about Mouton's life as the owner of enslaved people, men, women, and children, and of atrocities committed during that period by Mouton and others, Naquin, a Republican, asked the political party affiliation of Mouton. He was a Democrat, Swanson said, explaining that the party at that time bears no resemblance to the party of today. Guillory, who also is a Republican, addressed his fellow Republicans. To my white Republicans, you might have fear, but don't let that fear drive you, Guillory said. Removing the statue is not erasing history, he said, but provides an opportunity to teach history properly. Fear not this change, for this change is healthy, Guillory said. This is a community that is healing. And in other news, hundreds in Louisiana could get new trials. Sup- Supreme Court to decide if ruling on split verdicts should be retroactive. By John Zimmerman. Up to 1,601 Louisiana inmates remain locked up based on non-unanimous jury verdicts that were left untouched when the U.S. Supreme Court decided in April to outlaw split verdicts, defense advocates said Wednesday, citing the results from a month-long research effort. Most of them, an estimated 1,302 inmates, would potentially need to be retired if the Supreme Court were to extend its decision this year in Ramos versus Louisiana to include inmates who have exhausted their appeals, they said. The High Court agreed only weeks after its April ruling in the Ramos case to decide the retroactivity issue in taking up the case of prisoner Dedrick Edwards, who is serving a sentence of life without parole. A divided jury convicted Edwards of aggravated rape, 2 counts of aggravated kidnapping, and 5 counts of armed robbery related to a 2006 crime spree in Baton Rouge. In defending Louisiana's anomalous jury law before the Supreme Court last year, State Solicitor General Liz Murrow raised the specter of a state court system buckling under a mountain of legal challenges and regurgitated felony cases. Advocates and some members of the Supreme Court have suggested that Murrow was far overstating the potential effect and simultaneously ignoring the consequences to those inmates' rights by applying its 6-3 ruling in the Ramos case only to newer convictions. Unlike in its ruling in the Ramos case, the High Court is likely to focus on the potential fallout as it decides if Ramos was the kind of rare watershed ruling that justifies going back in time. The bottom line, according to research led by the Promise of Justice Initiative, is that up to 1,302 state inmates will likely get a new trial date should the High Court rule in Edwards' favor. Far fewer would likely face another jury, given that the vast majority of cases are settled with plea deals. Those findings are contained in a friend of the court brief filed Tuesday in the case by attorneys with the Promise of Justice Initiative, the Louisiana Association of Criminal Defense Attorneys, and the Orleans Public Defenders. To research The research is the first attempt to hand count the number of inmates sitting in Louisiana prisons based on guilty verdicts that were reached over the objections of at least one juror. The vast majority of those inmates didn't get a shot at a new trial based on the court's decision in the Ramos case, which so far applies only to current and future defendants, as well as those still fighting split jury convictions on direct appeal, a process that generally takes a few years. Until every prison in until every person in prison by a Jim Crow jury is freed or given their day in court, this shameful monument to white supremacy will continue to stand, said Jamila Johnson, managing attorney on the research project for the Promise of Justice Initiative. The group announced it had enlisted pro bono lawyers to file a flurry of lawsuits in a litigation campaign meant in part to highlight the stories of men and women now incarcerated from verdicts by juries that failed to reach consensus. Given that about 30,000 inmates are serving time in Louisiana, the group of inmates believed to be imprisoned based on split verdicts represents about 5% of the state inmate population. Defense advocates argue that it's a manageable burden for Louisiana should the court scrap those older, non unanimous verdicts as well. They point out that most hung juries result in later plea deals to resolve those cases before a retrial. There is no grandfather clause in the Constitution that allows the state of Louisiana to incarcerate more than 1,500 people based upon a racist and unconstitutional law just because they had the misfortune of being convicted before a specific date, said Ben Cohen, an attorney with the Promise of Justice Initiative who represented Ramos. There was among 5 amicus briefs filed Tuesday in the case, 4 of them in favor of Edwards. A fifth brief, co-written by former Texas Solicitor General Jonathan Mitchell, argues that even if the court ruled that the Ramos decision applies to older convictions, most inmates still are barred under federal law from challenging them. In a statement, Muir said a broader set of convictions stands in the crosshairs beyond those reached by split juries. In every one of these cases, there are victims of heinous crimes, victims like the one that Cedric Edwards confessed to brutally raping, Murrow said, adding a graphic description of the allegations that led to his conviction. It is unclear how the Ramos case would apply to cases that Murrow cited as being under challenge, including plea bargains and even some unanimous convictions. Mura did not respond to the questions about her own estimate of the number of inmates who would get new trials should Edwards win his case. State voters got rid of split verdicts by a nearly 2-to-1 margin in 2018, but only in trials for crimes committed in 2019 or later. The vote came 120 years after Louisiana became the first state to adopt split verdicts in criminal cases at an openly white supremacist conviction in 1898. Oregon is the only other state to follow suit, adopting split verdicts in 1934. The laws in both states survived a fractured U.S. Supreme Court decision in 1972 until the High Court shredded that ruling in April. A 2018 series in The Advocate, which analyzed several thousand jury trials conducted over a 6 year period across the state, found that Black defendants were 30% more likely to be convicted by a less than unanimous jury than white defendants in Louisiana. In the state's largest parish, East Baton Rouge, and elsewhere, Black jurors were also dramatically more likely to cast a dissenting vote against conviction, the data show. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, a nominee of President Trump, echoed the newspaper's analysis in a concurring opinion in the Ramos case. In light of the racist origins of the non unanimous jury, it is no surprise that non unanimous juries can make a difference in practice, especially in cases involving Black defendants, victims, or jurors, he wrote. After all, that was the whole point of adopting the non unanimous jury requirement in the first place, and the math has not changed. Attorney General Jeff Landry and Murrell, his appointee, urged the Supreme Court in October not to overturn its 1972 decision in a case called Apodaca versus Oregon, arguing that the state had relied on split juries for nearly a half century. With the court's approval, and turning back now would create chaos. Louisiana has 32,000 people who are incarcerated right now at hard labor for serious crimes, and every one of them would be subject to be able to file an appeal, Muir argued in October. But retroactivity wasn't before the court when it decided the Ramos case. Now it is. The researchers said they began with the Advocates database of trials, expanded the search back to the 1970s, dug through court records, and conducted outreach with thousands of inmates and their families. Moving on to CDC, Louisiana infections higher than case counts showed by Emily Woodruff. When coronavirus cases reached 10,000 in Louisiana on April 3rd, Governor John Bell Edwards called it a grim milestone. According to a new study from federal researchers, the real case count in those early days of the state's outbreak was actually much grimmer. By early April, there were at least 267,000 people infected with the coronavirus in Louisiana, or about 1 out of every 17 residents, according to research from the Federal Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which was published earlier this week in JAMA Internal Medicine. That estimate, based on an analysis of routine blood screenings conducted across the state from April 1st to the 8th, means that Louisiana's true case count was 16 times higher than the 17,000 cases reported to the federal government as of April 8th and based on positive COVID 19 tests. Tulane epidemiologist Susan Hassick said the CDC study indicates that the positive tests represented the extreme tip of the iceberg. Whatever we're capturing, at least certainly in that early time period, there was a lot more infection present than we were remotely aware of, said Hassick, who was not involved in the study. It was already everywhere. Louisiana was one of 10 areas across the U.S. included in the CDC survey, which also looked at samples from New York City, Western Washington, Philadelphia, Missouri, South Florida, Utah, San Francisco, Connecticut, and Minneapolis during collection windows from late March to mid May. The survey found prevalence was anywhere from 6 to 24 times higher than case counts in certain regions. With an estimated infection rate of 5.8%, Louisiana had one of the highest estimated rates of the 10 sites during the first round of analysis, second only to New York City. New York City had the highest rate at about 7%, and San Francisco, which had been under stay at home orders for 5 weeks at the time of testing, had the lowest rate at 1%. This study is in line with other studies that show there is quite a lot of asymptomatic illness out there, said lead study author Dr. Fiona Havers, a member of the CDC Seroprevalence Task Force, which has been studying how widely the virus was spreading in the early days of the outbreak. There are clearly a lot of people sick who don't know they are infected. The study was based on antibody tests, which look in a person's blood to see if there is evidence of prior infection. Study authors didn't collect the samples specifically for their survey, but got access to blood samples taken for routine tests, such as cholesterol screenings or pre employment physicals, in a process known as convenience sampling. It's a method that has been used to detect the prevalence of other infectious diseases such as HIV and H1N1. About 1,200 samples were tested for antibodies across Louisiana. The study did not adjust their areas experiencing more infection rates in the state, Havers said, meaning the estimated number of infections could still be an undercount. The samples were statistically readjusted to estimate infections for the entire population. The disparity between known cases and the estimated prevalence in the early days of the pandemic underscores how the understanding of asymptomatic and mild cases has shifted over time. When the coronavirus first began showing up in the U.S., a lack of available testing made it nearly impossible for public health officials to gauge the true spread of the virus. Most didn't realize how many mild or asymptomatic cases were out there either. This number would have shocked me back then, said Dr. Joe Cantor of the Louisiana Department of Health. It doesn't shock me now. We learned a lot over April and the beginning of May about the significance about asymptomatic infection. Understanding the true case count is important because it helps officials slow the spread and guide ongoing measures as restrictions are lifted. It also it also helps researchers better gauge how deadly the disease is. The high case count in Louisiana still indicates that the vast majority of people have not been infected. Researchers say about 60% of the community would need to be infected before reaching herd immunity, through, though it is still unclear whether antibodies provide protection or how long that protection might last. That means social distancing, mask wearing, and other efforts to mitigate the spread of the virus are still critical, health officials said. That's still far away from anything like herd immunity, said viral, virologist Robert Gary, an expert in emerging diseases at Tulane University. There's plenty of opportunity for the virus to still spread in this population. Recent reports from the state health department demonstrate the continued spread. On Wednesday, Louisiana saw the largest single day increase in coronavirus related deaths since May 1st, bringing the total to 3,558. Hospitalizations also hit a high record since that date at 1,581 patients. Total cases in the state are now 99,354, with the percent of positive cases steadily increasing over the past few weeks. 8 of the 10 U.S. sites selected by the CDC have been analyzed in a second round, but a second set of Louisiana samples have not yet been analyzed, said Havers. The The CDC has plans to continue the study for a year with multiple rounds of analysis. An Ochsner Health System study based on antibody and coronavirus tests from mid May in Orleans and Jefferson parishes found that 7.8% of the population had already been infected. Future rounds of testing will also tell CDC researchers whether antibodies fade in the community after a few months. As with the other 8 sites that have been analyzed a second time, it's expected that the number of people with antibodies will increase, showing that the true rate of infection could be many times the rate of positive tests. In those regions, the second analysis showed that cases were between 3 and 13 times higher than reported, based on recent based on recent case counts that would suggest hundreds of thousands more Louisiana residents could have been infected than what the state dashboard reflects. Overall, experts took the research as a message of caution, especially as Louisiana loses ground in efforts to keep the number of cases down. Election 2020 qualifying. Shreveport mayor enters race against Senator Cassidy as qualifying begins by Mark Ballard. Shreveport Mayor Adrian Perkins opened 3 days of candidate qualifying Wednesday with the announcement of his long hinted challenge to Republican U.S. Senator Bill Cassidy's re election. The addition of a well known and well funded Democratic elected official promises to enliven what had been a quiet campaign for Cassidy, who convincingly defeated incumbent Mary Landrieu in 2014. Cassidy's seat had been tagged as a safe Republican by national pundits in a state that, with the exception of governor, has elected only Republicans in statewide offices for the past decade. Candidates have until 4:30 p.m. Friday to file the documentation and pay the fees necessary to have their names included on the ballot for the November 3rd election. We face a virus that threatens our lives, our safety, and our economy. But Washington's political games are only making us sick, Perkins said. Together, we can demand a government that serves all of our people, not just the wealthy and the well connected. It's time to take a new road, and with faith and family, we can get there together. Right now, the people, the middle class families are hurting, Perkins told the Advocate and the Times Picayune on Wednesday. And I'm not seeing leadership and sense of urgency. Perkins, like most of Cassidy's opponents, faults the incumbent for voting to end the federal Affordable Care Act without supporting any replacement. About 400,000 Louisiana residents have received health care insurance coverage through an expansion of Medicaid standards allowed under the health law, which is often called Obamacare. Republicans for years have attempted to override the laws that created the federal plan covering those who can't afford adequate health care coverage. Cassidy has been one of the national media's go to spokesmen to criticize the health law. Perkins is a West Point graduate who served 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, twice in combat units. After leaving the military, he attended Harvard Law School. As mayor, Perkins balanced the city's budget and lowered crime rates. Perkins said he plans to drive to Baton Rouge on Thursday and officially qualify for the race about 11 a.m. Antoine Pierce, another Democrat, signed up Wednesday to challenge Cassidy, saying the incumbent grovels before President Trump and supports the president's policies without question. We don't need to see the level of spinelessness, Pierce said. Pierce has been running for the office for months. He had run a Baton Rouge coffee shop until it was closed because of the pandemic. John Paul Bourgeois, a public health librarian from Gretna without party affiliation, signed up to run for the U.S. Senate as his first bid for public office. He too faulted Cassidy's efforts to repeal the Affordable Care Act, particularly because so many low income Louisiana residents rely on the federal program as an avenue toward their receiving health insurance. Bourgeois is running without substantial funding and said staying home allows him to care for his two small children while putting together mailers and Zoom calls. David Drew Knight, who said his previous bid for public office was an unsuccessful run for the U.S. Senate in Nevada, signed up to run against Cassidy as a New Orleans Democrat. Somebody has to do the work, he said, adding that he will begin raising money Wednesday afternoon for what he and most pundits expect to be a $10 million race. Derek Champ Edwards, the Harvey Democrat who ran for the U.S. Senate in 2016, state treasurer in 2017, and again in 2019, is running again for the U.S. Senate. Hundreds of offices are up for grabs in the November 3rd election. The race for president, probably between Trump and Democratic former Vice President Joe Biden, will top November's ticket. Five of the six Louisiana congressmen are running for re-election, and they all sent surrogates Wednesday to sign up. All the incumbents attracted opponents, but only two of the races are expected to be competitive. Acadiana's third U.S. congressional district is pitting Republican incumbent Representative Clay Higgins of Lafayette against a surprisingly strong challenge by former oil field driller Rob Anderson, a Democrat and DeQuincy native. And in northeast Louisiana, with U.S. Representative Ralph Abraham, Republican Alto, choosing to retire at the end of the year, the 5th U.S. Congressional District attracted seven candidates on the first day of qualifying. The candidates include Abraham's former Chief of Staff, Luke Letlow, a Republican, the former Louisiana House Majority Leader, Lance Harris, Republican of Alexandria, and Ruston Democratic candidate Martin Lamel Jr., who is Chief Operating Officer at Grambling State University. The 5th District heads south the Arkansas border, covering Monroe and Alexandria, turns east to include the far suburbs of Baton Rouge, then runs along the Mississippi border through Bogalusa to the toe of the boot. Three Democratic women signed up to run for the seat held by Chief Louisiana Supreme Court Justice Burnett J. Johnson, Democratic of New Orleans. Under state law, judges can't serve past their 70th, I'm sorry, birthday, but can serve out their term. Johnson's 10-year term ends December 31st. The seven-member High Court has six men and one woman. Two judges on New Orleans' Fourth Circuit Court of Appeal, Sandra Cabrera Jenkins and Terry Love, are running for Johnson's seat. Orleans Parish Civil District Court Judge Piper Griffin also qualified to run on the first day. Both Public Service Commissioner Eric Mehta, the Metairie Republican who represents much of suburban New Orleans, and Commissioner Foster Campbell, Democrat of Bossier City, qualified to run for re-election. Both drew opponents on the first day. And now, proposed budget cuts, parks, recreation. Community development programs also marked for reduction by Claire Taylor. Lafayette Parish Mayor President Josh Guillory presented the city and parish councils Tuesday with the first budget of his presidency, a conservative proposed budget for 2021 based on reduced city sales tax income and reflecting cuts to various departments and programs. Because of a lengthy meeting scheduled Tuesday, the parish council meeting started at 5 p.m. Tuesday, and the city council meeting didn't end until 2:45 a.m. Wednesday, 2:45 a.m. on Wednesday. Chief Financial Officer Tori Toops did not provide an overview of the proposed budget for the fiscal year that begins November 1st. The overview will be given at a special joint meeting of the councils at 1 p.m. July 28th. Review of the budget by the City Council begins July 30th. The City and Parish Councils tackle the budget starting August 6th. Lafayette City sales taxes dropped $1 million in April and June and $1.4 million in May after the governor ordered businesses closed to slow the spread of coronavirus. The proposed 2021 budget projects city sales tax collections to decrease by about 27% over the 2018-19 budget. Guillory's budget zeroes out operating subsidies from the parish general fund to parks and recreation, the Hyman Performing Arts Center, and golf courses, while reducing subsidies for the Science Museum, transit, and more. Personnel cuts are proposed in the budget, including 37 parks and recreation employees that Guillory announced recently he was laying off, 24 employees in community development, and 13 in utilities. An annual 2% raise for employees was not included. In the Parks and Recreation Department, funding for swimming, tennis, and therapeutic programs was eliminated. In the Community Development Department, funds for the Housing Rehab Program and Neighborhood Pride Program were zeroed out. Funding for Project Front Yard and the Cultural Economy Program Create was totally eliminated from the proposed budget, along with funding for the Animal Shelters Trap Neuter Return Program. Area's session gains tooted. No decision yet on need for legislators to return to Capitol by by Ken Stickney. Area lawmakers said Wednesday that Acadiana enjoyed numerous successes during the 2020 legislative sessions, but challenges to business recovery from COVID-19 will loom largest if lawmakers return for a special session in the fall, perhaps in October. Discussion about a fall session would not likely start until August, lawmakers said. Five Acadiana legislators, all Republicans, met on a Zoom conference. More than 130 people were on the call and touted these among boost or potential benefits to the economy in a time of pandemic. State Representative Bo Bolio said Louisiana Main Street Recovery, administered through the Office of the Treasury, will help small businesses that have seen no previous aid through grants of up to $15,000. Applications will open next week. The program applications form favors women, minorities, and veterans. State Representative Stuart Bishop said the franchise tax has been suspended a year for small businesses under a House resolution. The cost to the state is about $7 million, he said. Businesses that collect sales taxes to send to the state will be able to keep a modest amount more than previously, said State Representative John Stefanski said. Enterprise zones will expand to include additional businesses, Bolio said, that will include restaurants, bars, and hotels whose businesses have been gravely affected with business downturns during the pandemic. He said that would help small businesses, especially in strapped communities, to hire more help when needed. They've been hit the hardest, he said. Stefanski said lawmakers passed tort reform legislation that dropped the threshold for jury trials from $50,000 to $10,000, which many observers say would ostensibly limit judge shopping. Attorneys will also be allowed to discuss some matters of insurance and whether crash victims wore seatbelts, among other reforms. The changes Stefanski suggested would help to make the cost of auto insurance more competitive. Bishop, who chairs the House Ways and Means Committee, said he worked hard on the capital outlay bill this year, trimming programs in a cash strapped year except for major priorities and projects underway, including infrastructure projects like roads and bridges, ports, and levees. We moved a ton of projects, he said, which brought the final capital outlay bill below its cap for the year. It also funded projects in which a state match was needed. Lawmakers also discussed continuing efforts for cooperation to keep U.S. House District 3 intact, which would mean keeping Lafayette and Lake Charles in the same district. The combined areas styled themselves as a super district, now with close ties in Chamber of Commerce and industrial recruitment efforts. Lawmakers said the two have shared interests as well, which might include political backgrounds, agriculture, the energy industry, and the Louisiana coastline. Stefanski said it was important to keep the two largest population centers, Lafayette and Lake Charles, in the same district. To that end, one Acadiana's Andre Bro, who moderated the meeting, reminded lawmakers and participants on the call to keep pushing for a full count during this census this year, which will affect redistricting of political lines. Okay, let's talk about educators. Vermilion Parish educators honored for devotion. Inaugural Kiwanis Awards recognize essential role by Katie Gagliano. On July 14th, Vermilion Parish educators were honored at the inaugural Kiwanis Educator Awards and cheered for their passion and devotion for educating and uplifting children. It was a more low key event than originally planned, with guests wearing masks and honorees being recognized in small groups. But virus concerns couldn't dull the community's pride and the outpouring of joy. It still gives me goosebumps to think about it, an event organizer Andrew Dozier said. At the ceremony, the 21 educators in the top three for the support staff at elementary, middle, and high school teacher and principal categories were recognized. Then a top finalist was named in each category. Dara Broussard of Dozier Elementary, Melinda Roy of North Vermilion Middle, and Lacey Moe of Abbeville were honored as the top teacher finalists. Elizabeth B.R. of James A. Herod Elementary, Wendy Stute of Erath Middle, and Belissa Smith of Erath High were honored as top principal finalists, and Tiffany Roche of Herod Elementary was named the top support staff finalist. Dozier began developing the idea for an educators recognition program in 2017 when he served as Kiwanis Club of Abbeville president. Inspired by Vermilion's parish strong statewide performance in the past 5 years, Dozier said he wanted to honor the educators, administrators, and support staff who make student achievement possible. Dozier, know, Dozier, now a Kiwanis lieutenant governor, shadowed the Lafayette Education Foundation for the past 2 years, learning about its nomination and selection process, the pen patrol, and the logistics of its long running awards gala. The Kiwanis inaugural gala gala was scheduled for March 31st, but the novel coronavirus pandemic upended the plans and made gatherings unsafe. The team bid its time and waited for improvements in the region's coronavirus trends. But with the situation changing each week and the window of opportunity closing before the new school year, Dozier said he and the other Kiwanians knew they needed to act quickly to have an in person celebration. Dozier said it was important to him the educators felt the community's gratitude. Educators are essential every day, and they are the pillar of the community for our youth. Educators are there with our kids on a daily basis, and they are doing the groundwork, he said. Abbeville High teacher Lacey Moe, the high school teacher top finalist, said she was blown away that her co-worker Brooke Broussard thought enough of her contributions to their campus that she would take the time to praise her. Every teacher puts in more than their job description requires, and to be uplifted when everyone around you is working just as hard is humbling, she said. An Abbeville High alumni, Mo, said she's a wildcat through and through. I think that because I'm an alumni, I want to work every day to make it better because I know the potential that school has. A lot of people look down on my school, but we've proven ourselves, she said. The 10-year teaching veteran works as the school's virtual education coordinator and has her hands in many extracurricular pots. She helps plan homecoming, coaches softball and girls volleyball, sponsors the Beta Club and the senior class, and serves on the school's leadership team. Mo grew up working in her family's grocery store and said hard work and a helpful nature are in her blood. The hard work at school translates to lasting supportive relationships with the students, some of whom come from disadvantaged backgrounds or lack support systems at home. I like to get to know the kids because all of them have a story, and a lot of them, sad to say, don't have anyone at home to ask them how they're doing. I try to make them feel safe and feel at home, like they have someone they can trust that they can go to when they need something. Everybody needs somebody to believe in them, including myself, Mo said. Harold Elementary Assistant Principal Liz Biarb said her relationships with the roughly 400 third through fifth grade students at the school are also the driving force behind her work. Biarb said she loves using her talents to motivate students, inspire their love of learning, and develop their sense of confidence around schoolwork. There's nothing like the smile on a kid's face when they grasp a lesson and are proud of themselves, she said. They're our future. It's that simple. If we don't continue inspiring them, what's going to happen? It's important for us as educators to inspire them and motivate them to make our world a better place. BL worked for 7 years as a teacher in Acadia and Lafayette parishes before making the transition to administration. It took some time to build the confidence in her leadership ability, she said. Now that she's harnessed her voice, the administrator said she's passionate about empowering teachers and students to be leaders through positivity and encouragement. When they read the nominee letter and I realized it was me, I just started crying. I was humbled. I didn't think someone would take the time out of their day to write an essay like that about me. I truly couldn't believe it was me. Man dies in Iberia Parish Jail, area's second inmate death in July. A 25-year-old man died Tuesday while in custody at the Iberia Parish Jail, officials say. The man was found unresponsive in his cell by jail staff about 3:45 p.m. The staff members attempted life-saving measures but were unsuccessful, and the inmate was later pronounced dead. A statement from Iberia Parish Sheriff's Office spokesman Captain Michael Hollier said. The man's identity is being withheld pending family notification. This is the second inmate death in Acadiana in July. 2020, there are 161 days left in the year. Today's highlight in history: on July 23rd, 1829, William Austin Burt received a patent for his typographer, a forerunner of the typewriter. On this date, in 1999, Space Shuttle Columbia blasted off with the world's most powerful X-ray telescope, and Eileen Collins, the first woman to command a U.S. space flight. In 2017, a tractor trailer was found in a Walmart parking lot in San Antonio, Texas, crammed with dozens of immigrants. 10 died and many more were treated at a hospital for dehydration and heat stroke. The driver, James Bradley Jr., was sentenced to life in prison after pleading guilty to transporting the immigrants, resulting in death. Today's birthdays: concert pianist Leon Fleischer is 92. Retired Supreme Court Justice Anthony M. Kennedy is 84. Rock musician Martin Gore is 59. Model actress Stephanie Seymour is 52. Rhythm and blues singer Sam Waiters is 50. We're moving on to the zodiacs. Leo, keep your private life and opinions to yourself. Let your actions speak for you. Taking charge and getting things done will impress someone influential. Virgo, stay out of situations that are sensitive or unstable. If you want to make a difference, do so from afar. Put your safety first to avoid learning the hard way. Libra, don't buy into a scam someone is offering. Invest in yourself and avoid joint ventures. A change at home may not be welcome, but it will end up being beneficial. Scorpio, you've got the right idea, so don't let anyone criticize your plan. A partnership with someone like minded will bring about the changes you want to make fast and efficiently. Sagittarius, make a personal improvement. A domestic or lifestyle change will give you peace of mind. Share your feelings with a good friend or a loved one. Capricorn, a financial opportunity looks promising. Invest in something that will improve your domestic situation. It may be time to trade up or to downsize. Make sure you know which. Aquarius, pay close attention and be sensitive to what loved ones are going through. A hobby or activity that reduces stress is encouraged. Pamper yourself and those you love. Pisces, a change of attitude or to the way you take care of your responsibilities will help you get ahead. Look for unique ways to use and promote your skills. Aries, focus on making personal improvements and skillfully using what you have to offer. Keeping busy and being productive will get you further than being argumentative. Keep the peace. Taurus, listen carefully, gather information, and prepare to make changes based on your findings. Take what you learn and share your thoughts and opinions with someone who has something to contribute. Gemini, keep an open mind, but don't let anyone take advantage of you. Don't ignore a change someone makes behind your back. Do what's necessary and don't look back. Cancer, using your skills differently will open up a window of opportunity that can lead to a steady income or a partnership with someone who recognizes your talent. Negotiations look promising. And for the area deaths, um, Catherine Fontenot, St. Joseph Catholic Church at 11 a.m. And this has been your news for the day. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you have a great day.